Okay. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm Isobel Anderson, grandmother of Hominy
Well, mother of.
and mother of Jane, and 3 grandsons, and 2 sisters and a brother left, living yet. And I'm going to leave this little story of statistics and stories and letters and what do you have. Peggy, what's Peggy's last name?
Needing.
Well, Peggy Needing is my niece's oldest girl, and I'm going to answer some of the questions that she has written down here for me to see if I can come up. She said, what church did your family attend in Scotland? Well, they attended the Presbyterian church, because when my mother married, she was a Unitarian, and my father being a Presbyterian, she of course went to that church. And I don't have recollections of sitting in the church with the family. I don't seem to remember that part, but I remember a lot going to church with my aunts. They used to take me to church a lot. And it says, do you know of any family members in Scotland who have done any genealogy? No, not any. Genealogy, not any.
Either that, too.
Yeah.
Were there other? How many other churches and things were there in Scotland?
Well, the Presbyterian is the Church of Scotland. And of course, there was the Catholic Church. But there were, my mother being Unitarian, and I'm sure there were a lot of other denominations in Scotland besides the Presbyterian. Congregational and Unitarian, and of course the Anglican Church was very popular. Any special family traditions? Well, I don't know. We always had big dinners and birthday dinners, and my mother always would have a white tablecloth on for birthday dinners and a special birthday cake and a special dinner. But other than that, we didn't do a whole lot. Not a lot of gifts and things like that. Plus, there were always some, and we always had. Christmas was a big celebration, and of course, Robbie Burns's birthday, which is in January, that was a day to celebrate.
And what's Robbie Burns?
Robert Burns.
Robert Burns,
The author?
the Scottish poet,
It's Robbie.
who died at the age of 35, an alcoholic.
Now, is Scotland where they do the Highland dances and
Yeah,
things like that?
yes.
Would you go to
And have all the
celebrations
Highland
like
games, yes, yes. But I never went to a Highland game there.
that? You never did.
Except I had made a trip over there years later and went to the Edinburgh Festival, where they had all the pipers and bands and that sort of thing.
What'd your village look like in Scotland?
It was a very small little town. All the houses were granite, and my grandfather was a stone mason and built homes there, and had wanted my dad to become a stone mason like he, but my dad would have no part of it. The other 2 brothers got in, the younger brothers did. One became, Uncle Joe was an architect, and Uncle Charlie was an expert on building fireplaces. He built beautiful fireplaces.
Now, are these houses like the walls you see in Pennsylvania?
Yes,
But that's
like
flagstone,
like a stone church. You would see they're maybe 2 feet thick, and the granite is piled. And Glasgow was one of the granite cities. They dug a lot of granite in the hills in Aberdeen. Did I say Glasgow? Edinburgh. Aberdeen is where the granite comes from. And then she asks, where did your parents meet?
Can I make a pause here just to
Yes.
see how this is doing?
to see what's going on.
Yeah, check, and then we can.
You can,
And we're back. After making a little pause.
Okay. We'll get this date out of here and go from there. All right.
yeah. One little thing that came into my mind just now about going to church and traditions. My aunts took me to the church in the daytime when they were having a memorial service for King Edward when he died.
When was
And that was about in 1910 probably, around that era. And
So you're about, what, 7?
the church was decorated with bunting, black and purple. And it was all draped
Royal.
and they had a memorial service in the church. And then later they gave a gift to all the school children, and they gave them enamel mugs with the king and queen's pictures on them, which was probably King George and Queen Mary, who came to the throne then after Edward. But that was in there. And then we get up to the question, where did your parents meet? My father and mother had an aunt and uncle who were married and lived in Fraserboro. And I don't know which was my father's relative and which was my mother's relative. But they lived in Fraserboro, and evidently my mother at one time came to visit Fraserboro to visit her Uncle Nan. And I believe that's where they met. But then later, Dad was in Glasgow learning the butcher trade, or working in a butcher shop there, and he boarded with the Macintoshes, and evidently got to know my mother more. And when they were married, then he came back from Fraserboro, and they were married in Glasgow. And what they call the Sauchiehall Street Gardens, which was evidently a big hall, like a dance hall or something like that. But that's all I know about the wedding.
So what was your uncle's name? Or that uncle?
That uncle, their name was Dunbar. And so I believe
Yeah, that's
David Dunbar was my mother's uncle, and then Aunt Isa had been my father's aunt. So that was, I remember her name was Isa. Other than that, that's as much as I know about that. So what occupation, and Dad was a butcher and owned his own shop. And my mother worked in a factory where they made men's underwear. And she ran a sewing machine. She told us that. She put the cloth band on the men's drawers, they call them. So then what type of education did they have? My father, I know, went to the 6th grade, and I believe my mother probably was about the same. But that was well-rounded education in those days, you know, reading and writing, and they learned how to write and copy and do that sort of thing, which was, Dad was a very good writer, and he, in his older days, would write poems and put things together. He did a little bit of that. Yeah.
Did he give them to people, or did he keep them to himself? Or?
He had, after my mother died, he did a lot of reading and a lot of writing, and he had a lot of poems that he wrote letters to her. He would sit down alone, and he was writing her letters, telling how he felt, you know, to get it out.
It's a way of grieving.
He didn't talk to people about it. He did it all with, But I have letters that he has written me, and they're nice handwriting, very nice writing. And I got into what was my childhood life, and what do I remember Scotland, and that is part of what I wrote out here, and
Good.
maybe,
Did you go over the names and siblings and stuff like that?
No.
no, I
She went into the
got
questions.
to
Okay.
that.
All right, we'll go through that later. That's fine.
You want to do that now?
No, we can run through what you.
Go ahead and finish what you were saying about what you wrote.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, well, yeah, I'll do that, this is what she asks about, what did you,
Remember?
remember of Scotland and about living. So this afternoon I wrote this out and I'll try it. The childhood home life in Fraserburgh, Grandma Fraser died and Mother's aunt coming. This is what I remember. My grandmother dying and this Aunt Isa coming to stay with Nellie and I while our parents went to the funeral held in my grandmother's home. The aunt holding me up to look over the wall to see the casket being carried out. I spent afternoons in grandmother's room when she was infirm. She gave me a handkerchief to dust the furniture. I also remember Aunt Jessie and Aunt Nellie dressing wooden dolls. They were sewing in, Grandma's bed was brought downstairs to the drawing room, and she died downstairs there, you know.
Do you know what she died of?
No, I never really heard, but I know she had some sort of a stomach trouble, and I would venture to say cancer, maybe, because for a long time they boiled barley and gave her barley broth. That was the one thing she could keep on her stomach, and she was just a little over 50 when she died, but she was a big, heavy woman. She was quite stout. I remember Grandpa Fraser was a rather severe man, always dressed with a shirt and a tie. He did lawn bowling, hunted rabbits and grouse, and would come to our house, which was only kitty corner from where his home was. After hunting, he'd come in, leaving us a rabbit or a hare, and showed us the ferret, which he kept in the pocket of the hunting
Yeah.
shirt or jacket. And we were always scared of that. Looked like a rat, you know, they're dangerous. I have many happy memories of our relationship with our father's family in Fraserburgh, going to the cemetery on Saturdays with Aunt Nellie, taking the flowers. She taught school, so she was home on Saturdays, and Aunt Jessie kept house. Uncle Charlie took us to the barn to see the horses, which were Dad's horses. Dad owned the horses, and gathering the hay and riding up on top of the hayload. Also buggy rides and so on. And when the little colts were there, that was a lot of fun too. Visiting Dad's uncle and aunt in the country, walking home, I ran across the lane and a motorcycle ran me over. I was not really badly hurt, but it knocked me down. Skin in my legs.
Did you know the person?
Scared me to
Was
death.
it somebody from your village or?
We evidently didn't know who it was, but he stopped and got out. To the sands with our mother, or with Jeannie, who was my mother's mother helper type person. She worked for Mom and sometimes took us Fraserburgh going. Early mornings when staying with my aunt, going to the up to see the sailboats out of the window in the boats in the North Sea. And the bedroom was up in the attic, and they had a bay window with a seat on the window, and I could climb up the window and see all those little sailboats going out in the early mornings. We'd see that. My aunt's going to swim at 6 a.m., and promising they would take me, but never
In
did.
the ocean? They
In the ocean.
in the North Sea.
In the North Sea.
Oh,
which
hardy
was
souls.
very cold. Yeah.
6 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this was Jesse and
My Aunt Jessie and Aunt Nellie. And of course Uncle Charlie and Uncle Joe were living at home there then too. And in the evenings when the band from the armory would be practicing and marching down the street, the kids would follow the Piper band. And I remember one night I was out rather late and got reprimanded for that.
How did they reprimand?
Well, I
Was that
really got a
verbal
good
or-
scolding, I guess, and probably didn't get my supper or something, whatever that was. But I know I had been running with one of the bigger girls, somebody bigger than me that was dragging me. And I still loved to hear the bagpipes march to the band. I remember the night Mary was born. I was awake and the doctor came and the midwife and Aunt Agnes was there, and she had come from Glasgow to be there, and it was June, and I remember them talking about having had snow in June, and they thought that was very unusual. So that's as far as I got on the answering what the memories were up in Fraserburgh.
what kind of clothes did you wear?
We
Mostly
wore
dresses or?
mostly wool, home knit sweaters and skirts, and home knit socks, and warm clothing, you know, and summer and winter. We never seemed, I don't think we had 2 seasons of clothes.
Did your mom make all your clothes?
My mother made all of our clothes. She did all the sewing, yeah. She was good. She was handy with the sewing machine, always.
What kind of colors?
Well, plaids, any kind of bright
Scottish.
plaid, Scottish plaid. And generally, I think most of the colors were navy blue or brown or grays or reds or something. But I do know my dad did not like red dress. He didn't like reds. We never wore a red dress.
Oh, right.
He didn't like reds. That was part of him, evidently. So, other than that, no. What else have you got on there?
Well, you want to see how we get through names and things like that?
Oh, yes.
I think I'll take this opportunity.
My
to say
siblings.
Right.
Well, there was Nellie, who was 14 months younger than I was, and then Agnes, George, Mary.
Well, we're missing a bunch here.
We are?
This is from George Fraser and Helen Mitchell. Is that-
Oh,
is that
that's
right
my
or no?
grandfather's
Oh,
family.
well, wrong. I
My
got the wrong.
father's siblings.
I've got the wrong page.
Okay,
There we go.
okay.
William and Mary.
William and Mary, yeah. Well, I got from Isabel, Nellie, Mary, George, Charlie,
Jesse and Agnes.
Jesse, and didn't I get Agnes in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jesse, Charlie, and Ann. Seems like I tripped up on,
Yeah.
got somebody ahead of Charlie and after George. Mary
Oh.
is after George.
There's a lot of
Huh?
She's got a question. There's an Anna. Or
Well, that
Annabelle.
was Dad's second wife. Dad married the second time after he was 75 years old.
Oh, I see.
So that comes in a little later.
Do you know her last name?
I did know it, but I
Yeah.
don't know it now. No. She was a German lady and had been an orphan and had a family that belonged to her late husband. And that niece sort of took care of her. And she had a family. We got to know them. They were from Minneapolis.
And where did your mom die?
My mother died in Jamestown at the Trinity Hospital. She was only sick from overnight at home, and they took her to the hospital at 10 o'clock in the morning, and she died before 10 o'clock at night.
Wow.
She died of pneumonia, but had an enlarged heart and
Oh.
had that, and high blood pressure, hypertension, that sort of thing. And let's see, where did neighbors? Neighbors and playmates, I don't remember anything about. I know the doctor lived across the street from us, but we were not neighborly. The only time I saw him when somebody would be sick, probably when we all got our shots, and that's all we got. That was the end of it.
What kind of shots did you get? Were they doing the routine things?
Oh, we got, just routine shots, I believe. But we all had the whooping cough. I know that we had. And years later, we had, and of course we were vaccinated for smallpox. That was you had to do that, I think, before the baby was 3 months old, or even younger. That was the law.
What was your school? Was this a one room, multiple rooms? How big was your school?
No, the school was, I counted on the picture that I have of my first grade, 35 students with one teacher.
That's a good.
And they were all first graders. We were all the same size. So the schools we had good schools in Fraserburgh.
So how big was Fraserburgh? It must have been a pretty big place.
Well, was a town, it wasn't a city. No streetcars and no automobiles in those years, Nothing but a horse and buggy and whatever. Yeah. And of course the fishing industry was the one. Better shut that off.
We'll pause on this.
Is it on hold?
All right, still here. Okay, anytime.
Well, I went to school in Fraserburgh until we moved to Glasgow, and then of course I went to school 2 years in Glasgow. And then when we came to Canada, we were put into the grade according to our years. But when we got to Jamestown, I was put in the 5th grade, and that was for my years too. And Nellie went into the 4th grade, and George was in the 1st grade.
So how was the education? Did you feel like you?
Well, we seemed to be able to keep up. We were where we needed to be, yes. And I don't believe we were ahead any, that I didn't notice any difference.
That's good.
But I liked to go to school. I enjoyed it. That was okay.
What kind of foods did you have? What was the main thing you ate?
Well, we ate oatmeal usually for breakfast. And Mother had a barrel, a oak barrel that Dad had it made for them before they were married. And that barrel is what they kept like 100 pounds of oatmeal in.
Wow.
And
How long would that last?
well, it lasted a while. But oatmeal over there is steel cut oatmeal, not rolled oats like what you have here. It's like almost the whole grain cut, steel cut oatmeal they called it. And it was coarse. It was coarse, quite a bit coarser.
Does it
And
taste good?
took a little longer to cook.
Cook.
Well, it's the same grain, same flavor. And of course it was finely ground to make oat cakes, and we ate oat cakes a lot. And my mother used to make scones,
I was gonna say.
and they would be like baked in front on a grate in front of the fire, because she cooked with a fireplace, on an open hearth in Fraserburgh always. And we had lots of meat. We always had oxtail soup and stews and all of that.
Lamb or beef?
My dad was not fond of lamb, and we never ate lamb at home. But I've learned to eat lamb, and I like lamb very much. I enjoy it. But
So there are mainly cows around?
well, Dad, being in the cattle business, went out and bought the cattle. You see,
Makes sense. That's right.
yeah, yeah. So
You raise it, you eat it.
yeah. He always, yeah. We had beef tongue a lot. And, we ate anything and everything. Tripe, we enjoyed tripe.
Oh my.
Yes, eat a
You brave soul.
My mother cleaned it. All the work she had to do to clean it. That was a big job.
Do you have special desserts?
And yes, they did a lot of milk puddings, like bread pudding, rice pudding, macaroni she made into a milk pudding, and they had jellos and custards.
What was your favorite?
Yeah, and all was my favorite. And of course, always fruit cake. Fruit cake all the time. Sponge cakes and fruit cake were the kind of cakes we ate. And lots of soups, any kinds of soups.
What kind of cake would you have for birthdays then? Anything special?
At that time, until we came to Canada, I don't think we ever had a birthday cake. A birthday cake or a Christmas cake would be a fruit cake with little trinkets wrapped up in a piece of wax paper, like a penny, if you got the money, or the sixpence or something like that. That was your prize. But Halloween we would have, we dumped for apples in a tub at home, and just the family had Halloween together. I remember one Halloween special. That was one of the years that Dad was not over there, and I was big enough to remember all about that Halloween, and dunking for the apples and doing that sort of a thing.
Now, was Halloween like it is here, where you dress up, or it was just like a fall festival
No.
kind of thing?
Halloween
Church?
back there was trick or treat, not trick or treat. It was tricks. They pulled on everybody.
Like what?
Yeah, well, I never was allowed to be out, you see. So I don't know.
You just heard about it.
I don't know what they did, yeah. I really don't know what they did.
Was that mainly the boys, or just because of your age?
Because we were younger, yeah. Yeah, and of course my mother wouldn't allow us to be out at night, ever. Not in the city, in Glasgow, we were never out at night. Yeah, and see, I was 9 when we came over on the boat. So I was
Pretty little.
11 when we got to Jamestown. And I have more memories about what we did in Jamestown. But Halloween in Jamestown then was dumping over all the outside toilets and doing bad things. And I remember in Fraserburgh, though, and maybe it was Halloween, I don't know, but the boys tied a string on Dad's knocker on the front door, and they were across the street pulling the string, and he was furious and got out there and chased them away. So that maybe was trick or treat, but boys pulled those kind of tricks, which he had done all of his life. It was different when he grew up. Yeah. So anyway, so we have gotten through school, and what neighbors and playmates, I told you about that, we didn't know much about that. What responsibilities did you have at home? Well, everybody had, it was wash the dishes after the meals, and carry the wood and bring the coal and take out the ashes and all of that sort of thing. Somebody had to feed the chickens, and when I got to milk the cow when we got bigger, you know. And it went on chores. Everybody had their own chores. But Jessie tells about she never could understand why Mom needed so much water in the boiler on the stove. The reservoir was always empty for Jessie's part. But we had to carry the water to the house, and they used to bring it down on a sled, you know, just a little hand sled that you could pull and put the wash boiler full of water.
From a well
Pull
or a
it
spring?
down.
Or?
We had an artesian well at the slaughterhouse.
So-
And we were living on the plant where the slaughterhouse was.
So before you got the fun job of milking the cow, what was your job earlier? Do you remember?
Oh, I remember one time I was supposed to take the cow out and tether her down where there was some food, you know. And I was so scared of that cow that I got on the end of the tether, and the cow got disturbed about that long rope, you know, and somehow either ran away or something. I got into it for that. I was scared of that cow. I was scared of her. But
Big animals for a
but
little girl.
yeah, I did learn to milk the cow, and it went on. Nellie got the job, and then George milked, and then Charlie hated to milk that cow. He hated milking that cow. He would put on a pair of coveralls with nothing under them and go up and milk that cow because he didn't want to smell cow when he went to school. That was Charlie's way of doing it. And our home was, we went back to see it a year or so ago, and the man let us go through it, and Helen said, how could we ever, all of us, live in that little house? It was 4 rooms, 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. And the kitchen was as large as any of the, it was like one house, a square house cut in 4, and 2 closets, one for a clothes closet and one for a pantry. And we had a large table in the kitchen with a stool at the back of the table where about 4 of us could sit on the stool on one side, and then there were chairs around on the other side of the table.
And where did you all sleep?
And, as many as we could in the bed, 3 on the top and 2 at the bottom, or something like that. And there was a pull-out bed, like
Trundle?
a couch bed that in the living room, and 2 beds in the bedroom, and then Mom and Dad had a bedroom. And they always kept the baby with them. The baby slept with them until they got to be about a year old. That was how that had to be done. But we had lots of good times. We laughed and talked and made a lot of noise until Dad came home, and then everybody shut up. And
So your mom liked the noise?
yeah, and she would sing, and we had Victorola, you know, that we wound up played and had a lot of fun that. And we danced a lot. We learned to dance in the house and in the kitchen. And we never picked the newspaper up to read it until after Dad had read it and put it aside. And we never sat in his place at the table. And we never got to the table till he was there ready to eat, unless sometimes he'd be coming home too late and we'd have to eat before he got there. If he was out in the country buying cattle or something, or got tied up at the Elks Club or something, didn't get home, then we would be eating before he got home.
Would he ever play games with you, or was he kind of solemn?
He was quite serious. No, I don't remember him ever playing ball, but we used to play kick the can and anti-over and that kind of thing outdoors.
What-
There were enough of
What's
us.
the other one?
There was enough for we kids to play outside.
What was this?
We-
Anti-over?
Anti-over, yeah, you threw the ball over or whatever it was, and then there was a team on one side and a team on the other
Like
side.
of a fence or something, or
Over the shed, the wood shed or the any, you know, any.
Anything you could
Well,
find.
there was always the wood shed and the chicken coop and how in places outside sheds like that.
and so what
How'd-
constituted the game?
Well, you got the ball or whatever you tossed over the roof, they'd grab it and come around and
Snatch it.
grab you or find you. Then we played hide and go seek and things like that. Outdoor things, you know.
So what kind of, you know,
We could go skating and we went sleigh riding
In the
and
winter.
that sort of thing a lot.
did everybody have their own skates, or how many?
A hand-me-down.
Yeah. I mean,
No, we didn't have skates until we got big enough to earn them and get skates.
it's a big
you know.
thing.
Yeah. And I wanted a bicycle so bad, and I worked on the farm one whole summer and came home with $25, and I was expecting to buy a bike, and Mom said, well, wouldn't look very good for you to ride to school, and the rest of the kids have to walk. So I didn't buy the bicycle, and I never got a bicycle, and I never learned to ride, but I learned to drive a car, so then I didn't. After, you know, when I was growing up, Alfred had a car and we got a car. So then I drove. I was always a driver. I like to drive.
So what'd you do with the $25?
Bought a dresser to put in the room. Piece of furniture. Well, we didn't have any furniture, only the beds on the bedrooms. We had nothing at all when we came from Canada to Jamestown. No furniture, nothing. Just didn't bring anything. Yeah, I told the story on the other tape about how we came from Canada to Jamestown and how Dad came across, and all of that is on that
On that
tape.
audio tape.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
like copies, so.
Yeah, and I'm going to have some tapes done of that. So, well, I covered what were your relationship with your parents.
Well, did
Um,
what kind of things did you do with your mother? It doesn't sound like you did much with your dad.
No, he would read the paper in the evening and then we would study. And I remember when I would bring like a geography book home, he liked to read and he studied along. Like when I was studying, he was learning all about the United States and about the states and all the geography and the history. He was interested in that. And we read books and did things like that. But by the time you got the chores done and washed the dishes
Yeah, there wasn't much.
and did your studying and see that you had clothes to wear in the morning, and that there wasn't any time.
Did you
but-
feel close to them?
Oh yes,
Were they pretty loving or
we
pretty
were
affectionate?
happy. Yeah, we were. But my mother nor my father never held us, or only the baby. You know, the little ones. They never.
So you weren't like a little touchy, huggy family?
No, never.
Was that pretty typical for?
Very distant, very Scottish, very. I would say dour, as they call. Dour means sour.
Sour, yeah.
You know.
But
that-
that was typical for
But
everybody
distant.
else.
But that was the way life is. But you know, we've grown up and grown much closer to each other since we have grown up.
You kids.
Yeah, we all have. And my husband's family, coming from Norway, they had 10 children, and the last one were twins, 2 boys, and they were rather distant. They had that sort of a life too, but he was a very loving person, and always was very loving toward Jane and toward all the children. But his father was that way too, with children, very loving with children. you know, held them and comforted them and caressed them and enjoyed them. He enjoyed the children. And Alfred always did too. So then, where are we now?
Special remembrances of grandparents.
Yes, well, my grandparents, I have discussed mine, and my grandmother in Glasgow was a widow for a number of years before we went there to live. So she lived in a flat that was 3 stories up. And you went up sort of a winding stairway to get up there. And she always had something special for us. When we would come, we would go there after church, or go there to go to Sunday school with my Aunt Agnes. And Grandma always had something special for us when we came back from Sunday school and that sort of thing. And I remember sitting around listening to my aunts and my grandmother visiting and talking and having tea. We always, all the kids got tea, you know. They'd put milk in it for the kids. That was one big thing that we did. I enjoyed being my grandma's, but I remember one time in particular we went down there and she had baked cookies and put them aside so when we came she'd had them, but she forgot where she put them. And she could not find them. She didn't find them.
Sure nobody ate them?
And we didn't get them. And I remember being with her, you know how kids are, looking in all the cupboards down low. Didn't know what she did. I hope she baked them. But we liked Grandma McIntosh. She was a nice person. I enjoyed her. Yeah. So I got down to that. And
were there cousins around?
in Fraserburgh, my mother had a cousin that was married to a sea captain. And she was from the Dunbar family. She had been in Dunbar. And she married a sea captain. And he was at sea a lot. And they had, in all they had 6 children. And their children, there was one that was the same age as I was, and her name was May. And I remember the captain came home one year and brought, it must have been like a tricycle, but it was an automobile that you pedal with your feet. And I could make the thing go, but some of the other kids were too little, yeah, you know, smaller. But May and I could make that thing go. And he came home one year with turtles, you know, that he'd gotten overseas somewhere. And I remember he brought us all cups from Amsterdam. And when you got to the bottom of the cup, there was like the picture of a child and a dog, you know, raised in the glass. It was a china cup. They were something that was different. But I remember them a lot. And I think there were twins in that family. But we went up there, not often, but at times. But Fraserburgh was a town you walked everywhere you went, you know. So, but it wasn't that far.
Do you remember their names? The captain?
Crichton was their last name. But I can't remember, for a while I remembered the mother's name, but I don't quite remember. But their last name was Crichton. And I sort of think he was an Englishman, but he was a sea captain. So I can't remember any other children that I played with. I just don't, there must have been, but I don't recall. And I don't recall any in Glasgow either. Those things weren't, well, we played with each other.
Yeah, you had so many kids in your own
Yeah.
family.
We got along with each other fine. In Glasgow, Mom used to wrap me in like a shawl. It was not a knit shawl, it was like a woven rug traveling blanket, three-cornered, and you put one around your arm this way and the baby here, and then it went over your back and you held the other hand so you could play and have one hand loose and have the baby fastened in here. And I used to run around with Mary like that, outdoors playing, and we were playing ball and jump rope. We did a lot of rope jump. I did a lot of that. Those kind of things we can do. Could do that. That's what about what most people were doing in those days.
Were you a pretty typical family, or being
I think so. I think so. But it was my mother's idea, I think, part of it through my uncle and my two uncles in Winnipeg, and my mother pushed that my dad would make the transfer from Scotland to Canada. My mother always thought that it would be a better opportunity and a better place to raise a family. And Dad had a string of horses, must have at least 6, which he had really, he needed 2 for the wagon to, and the gig to, he delivered meat 1 day a week to the small towns, you know. And going to the cattle sales and all that, Dad got into the wrong crowd of people and got to drinking, and I believe that was the reason that my mother thought it would be better for him in Canada. And it was, and eventually when we came to North Dakota was a dry state, and there wasn't any liquor. But there were ways that it could be shipped in. You were allowed an allotment, and Dad could send for a certain amount of whatever he wanted, but never had much. But he would go on a binge every so often at the Elks and things like that. We had times getting home with the car and all of that sort of thing. Otherwise, I would say it was a typical family, which that wasn't unusual either, that alcohol were in families. Yeah.
Let's see. We got some more dates, but we can do dates later on paper.
Yeah. Some of the dates I found that I had an old diary that I had thrown the diary, but I pulled out all the dates of some are weddings and some are birthdays and so on that I've got it in this set of stuff.
We can go over that.
But I thought if we need dates, I might have those dates in that, the ones that I don't remember.
Okay.
But some of them I have taken down a little by little, you know.
You still doing okay? You want anything more to drink, or?
No, I'm okay.
Okay.
Seem to be.
That's great. So I think we're in. She's moved on to Canada. And you went over why your family moved. That's you're ahead of the game there.
I got that part. There's quite a bit on that tape, and I let you.
Good.
I intended to bring it, but we can't do it all in one night.
No. And in fact, if you get tired, we can. I mean, like we said, we're here for 2 months.
And that tape, has Peggy heard that tape?
No.
So
So
that's
we
why
can send that
And
along.
your mother hasn't heard it.
And we
either.
can make copies here because we have a double-headed tape.
That's one thing I
If
do
you want us to do that, we can buy some blanks.
I want to get the new tapes, and I want to get enough so each one of
Everybody
them,
can have one.
the families, will have one for Christmas.
We could do that for you.
Yeah,
Here.
we'll plan that.
Okay. So anything you think that's on the
I'll have to
tape?
find out what I need to buy for tapes, or have you buy them and
Yeah,
I'll
we'll
pay
get
for
them.
it.
That's
we
fine.
could do that.
Mhm.
It's just cassette, right?
Mhm. Now, there's a lot of questions.
Did you talk about Nellie's illness that we talked about at dinner when we were there before on the tape?
Oh, no. That's not on
She
the
probably
cake.
didn't specifically do Nellie because
No,
Yeah.
no.
see,
I
Peggy's
didn't.
more interested in Nellie because that's
Yes, and,
Yeah.
her
and
grandmother.
yeah, and I was working on the whole family. But you want to go into that tonight?
Sure. Yeah, that's down the list. That's about
Yeah.
on the list here.
Yeah. Well, I could give you a rundown on Nellie. She was a very bright student in school, and made most of her own clothes when she was in high school. And in those days, it was pleated skirts and a midi, you know, and
Yeah.
flat shoes
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. And while she was in high school, she came down sick with rheumatoid arthritis or something of that type, because she was very in a lot of pain and just would scream if anybody came near the bed to touch her. It must have been a rheumatic fever, something like that.
Her joints.
But anyway, they did have a doctor come to see her, and what he said it was, that I cannot remember much about. But I know before I was married, I went down and Alfred was with me, and we went into the bedroom to see her,
Oh, that was
and she was sick at that time. Well, she got over that and graduated from high school, and then went to summer school for 6 weeks in order to get a certificate where she could teach out in the country. And then she taught that year. I think 2 girls had the school, and she had a number of students of all ages. And I know she had trouble with the big boys, because some of the big boys were as old as she was, practically.
Yeah, it's hard to
And she was almost afraid of them, you know. It was
Was
risky.
she little like you?
Yes.
Petite?
Very, small bone, very petite, yes. But she was always healthy until she got that rheumatic fever.
And this was in North Dakota, or?
North Dakota,
Yeah.
yes. And the first school she got was at Woodworth. And I remember Alfred and I drove up there during hunting season because it was a great place to hunt. And he went up there to hunt, and I got to visit with her and visit the house where the lady boarded her. And she walked to school with the kids and ran the school. Well, then she was home, and then one year she worked a whole year at the state hospital and earned enough money to go 1 year to the normal school in Valley City. So she did that and went back. And so she went to school or worked always in the summers. And then she got I believe they called it a standard certificate. And she could teach in Wishart, which was a town school. And she had the first grade. And she taught there 2 years or more. And we went down there to visit her a number of times before she was married. Then she married down there, and they built a house, built a nice little house. It was like 2 bedrooms and a bath and a living room, a bathroom. It was a nice house, and that's where the children were all born.
Do you know how they met?
In Wishart, at a dance, I presume, or something, or church or something. But they went to the Presbyterian church, and the parents, Bill's parents, and his sisters went to the German church. And I don't know if it was Lutheran or not, but there was an English church and a German church, and they designated it that way, not as Presbyterian or Lutheran or what. But when they were married, they came to Jamestown, and my husband and I stood up with them, and they were married in the Congregational parsonage, because that minister married half the people in the county, you might say. He was the marrying minister. His name was Phillips, Reverend Phillips. And then About a honeymoon, I don't know. There wasn't any wedding or anything. We just, that was it. We went to lunch or dinner, and they went home to Wishick. And where they lived when they first got to Wishick, that I don't know or don't remember. Wasn't important at that time.
Were you real close? I mean, you were real close in age.
She and I were close.
Close
Yeah,
sisters.
yeah. Only 14 months apart, you see. So we were close in age and close together always. So
Got along well.
Yeah, we got along very well. Always very well. Yeah. But then they, from there, the wartime came along, and things got hard, and the hardware store, Bill was working with his father in the hardware store, and things got evidently to the point where the father and his brother could not support a third person, and Bill being the younger one, he was the one, and he went out and sold DeLaval separators, and for a while he was selling straw hats everywhere. He was stopping and driving all through the country, and I know Jane and Helen went down to Wishick with him one time with those straw hats, and they still talk about him selling those straw hats in every town, and nobody was wanting to buy a straw hat, and nobody wanted a DeLaval separator. So he, well, this was milk separator.
Oh, I see.
You know. And so he went to Devil's Lake and was working out at Devil's Lake for a while, and then he went to San Francisco to where his brothers were, and he had only the one brother, and he went there to get work in the shipyards. And I believe his sister Frida was there then too. It was either Frida or Gertie, or both of them. They were in San Francisco. And so Nellie was still in Devil's Lake, and she was sick. She was sick before Patty was born, and just thought it was because she was having another child, it was too much. And she said, she told me, she said, I just told Bill we cannot have any more children. I just can't handle it. So it went from that, and after Patty was born, she was still sick. And she had sleeping sickness, and they went on a vacation to try to see if that would snap her out of it. And I know Bill took her out in a boat. They went fishing and went to a lake. That was the thing to do, go from North Dakota to Minnesota to the lakes, you know. And she was sick, sleeping, then going into that sleeping sickness. And she was in the hospital for quite a while with that. And it just got steadily worse. And she must have been better when he went to San Francisco, because she got really ill, and the doctor came to see her, and he told her she had pneumonia. And she said, oh, Marion tells her, she said, oh, that's real bad. That's what Mama died with. So Marion kept calling. They called my folks home, you know, my dad. And this was, my mother had died in December 42, and Nellie died the next, in April or May. And it was, Uncle Jimmy died August, Mama died in December, and then Nellie died. We had 3 deaths in the family. Mother kept Uncle Jimmy in the home, you know. He came from Scotland, lived with us, and we enjoyed having Uncle Jimmy. Well, anyway, when Nellie got to the hospital, Jessie had, Butch was the baby, and she went up there with Butch, and Bud was in Newfoundland, in Greenland. He was working on a new facility that the government was building there. He never got into the service. See, he was working as a plumber. So Jessie drove up there and was up there, and I don't know if she got there before Nellie died or not. But anyway, Marion called a couple times. Isn't anybody coming up? Who's coming? Poor kid. She was left with the 3 kids, the other kids, you know. Anyway, after she died, my dad and Mary and I and Mary's husband drove up there, and my husband was there too. No, he wasn't. He wasn't there then. Anyway, we went up to the funeral, up to Devil's Lake, and Bill after that just sold the furniture and sold everything, and packed the kids, and they went off to San Francisco to live. But while Jessie has been at the University of Minnesota with her diabetes, there was a doctor there who was very interested in the whole family, and he was very interested in knowing what happened with Nellie. She died of Addison's disease, which at that time was almost unheard of, and it's a disease of the adrenaline gland. And Jessie with diabetes. Mary and I both had thyroids removed, so we have had a history of glandular problems. But that's what I know about Nellie's.
You said that Patty, you know, the pregnancy with Patty was so hard on her. Were the other pregnancies also, and did she want 4 kids, or I mean, did she want kids?
I don't know, but in those days there wasn't much to do. Yes, and Bill's family had been a large family. Our family was a large family, and people thought that was what else. That's what you did.
I mean, do you remember ever talking? I mean, you were sisters and you were close. Do you ever
We
talk to
never
her about
talked,
having kids, or
No.
you know, I'm only going to have one?
No,
That
no,
never came?
we never discussed that problem. For some reason, that never was talked in our family. Our parents never talked about it, and we weren't. But when we got older, and as things have gotten different, that barrier has been broken down. You know, you can talk to your children, and talk to your families. But in those days, they didn't talk about it. Even brothers and sisters didn't. But Patty was a very good child, and most of her years, until she was 3, she kind of entertained herself and played alone, and was kind of a different child. And there could be, there's a difference in her growing up. She was home alone, the other children went to school, and Nellie was sick in bed. And Patty played and entertained herself.
But she was healthy otherwise. I mean, there weren't any
She
complications with her.
always seemed to be healthy. Yeah. And as far as I know, she is healthy. Yeah. But she is a little bit of a loner. She's, you know, she's not close to the family. And you see, she was that way when she was little. That's part of her bringing up. But Nellie thought that was one of the reasons. And that was bad, that she had to be pregnant, and with that adrenaline gland slowing up, you know, you just go down, 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 you've got no energy. And she should have gone to have a shot once every month, and she decided that was too expensive. She didn't think she needed it. And Bill wasn't there to see that she did go and have it done. So that would, you know, that was part of that. Is he sleeping? About to sleep?
Yes. Falling off my iron here.
Yeah. Where are we now?
I think we're into education.
Oh.
We covered.
Well, I covered Nellie's education.
Yeah.
My education is a different story.
Yeah.
I really did like going to school. I enjoyed it. But then World War I came along, and I left school at the 9th grade and went to work. And I got a work up at the state hospital in Jamestown. And when I went up there for an interview, the superintendent interviewed me, and he said, well, and I was 16 and told him I was 18. And he said they were in need of somebody at the cottage. And that was the home that the superintendent, his wife, and one boy were living. And so he sent me over there to talk to her. And she was a Jamestown person, and her sister was the superintendent of schools. But anyway, she said, you really don't look 18. Anyway, she did hire me, and I went in there to be the second maid, and I was to wear a black dress and a white apron, and wait on the table, and do all the downstairs work, and assist with anything that the cook needed help for. And they had one lady that came over to wash dishes in the glass pantry, and she was a patient, but she came every day to wash the dishes and worked all day. In the morning, she worked upstairs in the bedroom, and she took care of Mrs. Hotchkiss's underwear and lingerie, and did the hand washing and took care of her bedroom. And after lunch, she came down to wash dishes and dinner dishes. Well, I worked only about 4 weeks, and the cook decided to quit. And I was to be getting $27 a month and my board and room. And the cook got $35, so I opted to take the cooking job if she'd give it to me. So she did, and I worked there, and we had a real nice room way upstairs in the attic, and it was a bungalow type house with a thatched roof, you know, and we had windows way up there. It was a real neat place to live. You could look all over the whole institution and face the administration building, and you see all the taxi cabs coming and trunks out in front of the door all the time, people coming and going, you know, and leaving. And it was interesting. I enjoyed it. So I cooked there for over a year. And then the girl that was working there as the second girl had her eye on the cooking job, and I wanted to get over into the nursing part of the hospital. And by that time, you see, I was a couple of years older, and
you really were 18.
They didn't know it, and they didn't know my age. But anyway, I did get the transfer, and I went over there to work in the women's wards, and I only worked about 3 months on the women's wards. And then when they had a vacancy, like in the officer's kitchen or anywhere, they would put me in there to relieve the cook.
Oh, because you could cook.
So, you know, because I had been, they thought they had a great cook because I cooked for the superintendent. So anyway, I learned a lot cooking for the superintendent. When I didn't really know what to do with an eggplant or something, which I had never seen before, I'd say to her, well, how would you like me to cook it? And she would explain to me how she did it, you know, and then I just took over from there. And I read the cookbooks a lot. So I really had to, but I had taken cooking in the 7th and 8th grade. and I got the fundamental part of cooking. So I worked from there on, and I cooked and worked all my life. So then I worked 9 months or more in charge of the patients, women patients' dining room. And you had about 15 patients that came to work with you as your crew. And they worked with you and set up the dining room and served the meal and all that. Then I had to take them back to the ward. Then I had to go to the ward and get them and bring them back for the next meal. Then you're off duty 2 hours, and then you're on. And then you worked till 8 o'clock, and then you could go to the dances afterwards and have big time. So that worked out fine until after I met Alfred up there. He had come back from World War I and was working in the boiler room and was with the outside crew. And I met him at the dances, you know. And the boiler crew were supposedly a step above the hospital crew. They all thought they were just a little bit above, so that was okay. So after we were married and I left and we kept house downtown, after Jane was born, Jessie used to come and eat her lunch with me because I lived close to school. And then when Jane was 18 months old, my mother took her and I got a position in the general kitchen up at the hospital there, and I worked there 14 years, second cook. And I cooked for the employees and relieved the head cook when he was on vacation. So,
well, that was unusual at that time, right? A working mom.
Yes, yeah. It
like
was. But not so much.
Did you get flack for that at all?
The hospital people did that because you get your board and room and you're required to live on the campus, you might say.
So who took care of Jane while you were working?
My mother. My mother had her.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's good.
From the time she was 18 months old. And Jessie was her companion because she knew Jessie. From Jessie coming to lunch every day, she felt close to Jessie. And you know, when she'd go to bed, she always wanted Jessie to come to bed. Well, Jessie was about 6 years older than Jane, and Jessie was happy to go to bed. She didn't have to do any more chores. She was happy with that. So my mother had her until she was a junior in high school. And by that time, that's the year we left the hospital and went to, I went to Denver. And that's the year Langer came in to the politics of North Dakota and turned the whole state inside out. He discharged all the people in the state bank, in the state universities, the state schools, the school for the feeble-minded, they called it then, which is now a school for retarded. No, they don't even call it that anymore.
Mentally challenged.
Mentally challenged.
Yeah.
Anyway, and the state hospital put in all the farmers to do the work, and it was quite a change. The whole state was quite different. So we left then, both Alfred and I left. He had been working all those years in the boiler room. He became a steam fitter, and he worked on all the plumbing and all the steam radiators and pipes and all that. He did a lot of that work. But that's where my education ended. Started and ended. But you go to school all your life.
Oh, yeah.
You know, keep learning here and learning there. And after I did, well, we worked.
You were a brave little soul to take on that job when, you know, you were...
I'd thought nothing of it, you know, that was a challenge to me. After I went into the Army, well, before I went, before I went into the Army, when I went to Denver, I worked at a YWCA school residence club where the girls from the University of Denver, some of them were boarding there. And I was there quite a while cooking. And then I went to Remington.
You were in your 20s or 30s?
Yes, yeah. Jane was out of high school then. And we went to Remington Arms. They were hiring people, you know, to make ammunition. So Jane and Alfred and I, all three of us, worked there. And we rented a house up in Evergreen, and we drove from Evergreen up in the mountains down every day. Remington Arms was out of Denver toward the mountains. So you see, we were 15 miles from the cabin down to work. So we were there until they closed Remington Arms. And then I went in the Army. And Alfred came, he worked in Fort Des Moines part of the time. And part of the time he was out at the VA hospital there and so on. And I was 2 years there. And then when the Army discharged, the older women were discharged first. They got out.
What year did you get in?
I went in 42 and came out in 45.
And you were how old then?
I was 49 when I went in. So I was one of the older ones. But they kept the older ones stationed like, they liked to have them like at the Baker School with the younger people to kind of stabilize them a little bit. There were a number of the older people there. So I came out as staff sergeant, so that helped a little bit. Until we got up to, then we came and stayed with Bill a little while till I worked in Atherton. So then we went from the Bartells, I went to the university and worked at the fraternity house for 8 years there. And then Alfred we bought the house and was able to move over there, and I went to work at the VA. So, and I retired from the VA in 66, I came out of there. So, that's about all of that story. That's another story.
You've done a lot.
Yeah.
Come a long way from a little girl from Scotland, huh?
Yeah, it was a long time.
So, did you get I might have missed this. Did you finish high school?
No, I came out of school in the 9th grade.
Mm-hmm. What did you like the most in school proper?
I liked mathematics fairly well, but I liked history and geography the best. But the thing I really liked the best in high school, that first year of high school, and the 7th and 8th grade, was the cooking classes. And I had a cooking teacher that tried to influence me to go to the university to become, what was it, the domestic science instructor or teacher, what, you know. But
she knew you had a gift.
She didn't know the house, the home situation, me being the oldest one of a big family, and I was just ready and looking to go to work. That was it. That seemed to come first. And after you once go to work, now Nellie did teach and go to school, and teach and go to school, but that's a little bit different.
It's harder that way.
Yeah. But she got her own. Now Mary, George did not go any farther than high school, and he played a lot of basketball and tennis in high school. And then he went to work in the butcher shop with my dad, and then he went into the service, and that was all the education he had. And Mary worked at the state hospital for a year, and then went to Fargo to the business school. And she came out of that in 1929 at the time of the Depression,
Wrong
and
time
you
for
couldn't
business
find a
school.
job. And she went to Minneapolis and worked for a while in Auto Club. It was a club like the Alta Club where there a restaurant and a club and all that. So she worked there for a while and liked that. And then she got into the hospital in Anoka, or Fergus Falls. She got in Fergus Falls first. And she worked in Fergus Falls, but was working in the superintendent's office. And she became medical secretary. And that's what she did in Anoka.
We've got a lot of people involved in hospitals in this family.
Yes, and nurses. And Charlie, that's what Charlie did too. There was George, and I told you about Mary. And Charlie, he had this thing about Roosevelt and the CC camps and all that. So he ran away from home and came to California and joined the CC camp. The first time he ran away, he packed himself a lunch. He got a can of pork and beans, and I can't remember one can of sauerkraut, but another, he confiscated it from my mother's larder. And early in the morning, you know, the trains on the hill come down very slowly to go through town. So he got himself up on the hill. And I can't remember if Helen and Jane were going to go with them to see him get aboard the train or what. But anyway, he got as far as Bismarck, and he was talking with some guy on the train, and he said, oh, he knew a good place in Bismarck to get food. There was a camp there or something where they were feeding these people that were out of work. So Charlie got off with this guy, and they were going through the line to get their meal, and some girl was serving on the line, and she said, Charlie Fraser, what are you doing here?
Oh no, somebody, oh no.
And she rung the bell on him and called the fella, and the police came and took him out of line and held him for all day and gave him a ticket and saw to it that he got on the train with his can of beans and with the can of sauerkraut and sent him home.
How old was he when he did that?
Well, he was, I don't think, was he out of high school? Maybe he was out of high school, I don't know. But anyway, that was Charlie's first experience. Well, he pulled it off again the next time he got to San Francisco. And he
On the train?
Or he joined the CC camp and went off with them. I guess that's the way he did it.
Officially ran away.
Yeah, he was bound to go. He was not going to stay home. Well,
No, he's the one that didn't want to milk a cow too, right?
No.
Oh, that was
And before he did this runaway bit in the summer, well, after he graduated from high school, Dad got him to work in the back shop in the market. And he was helping Bill Rinkett make sausage and bologna and, you know, and salt pork and all that stuff. They had their own smokehouse. They had their own smokehouse, and they did it all in the back shop. Well, when they came down to get paid, Charlie discovered that he was getting $50 a month for a whole month's pay, and he said, no, I'm quitting. He was not working for that kind of money. So he just simply walked out. He quit. So then is when he joined the CC camp and got away. And he was sent out here to California, and he was working on lots of things that they were building out here. And they worked in Yellowstone Park and They did a lot of building, and I can't remember when. Then he came back home for a while. Then he went to New York the next time he took off. He had money enough then to go to New York, and went and got into the Bellevue Hospital, and he was in nurses training, and he had been in there for a while when the draft got him. She was single and young.
Sure, World War II.
So then he was 8 years in the medical corps.
Oh.
And
Now, was that World War II or Korea?
where were we?
No, the war.
That
Which
was
war?
World War II.
World War II.
Yeah. My husband was World War One, but this is World War II, you see. So he was in this country in the medics from California to Bellevue, Virginia, all over the United States. And then he was finally shipped to Germany, and he was in Germany 2 weeks when they were taken prisoner of war.
Mm.
And he was put into the medics with the German, I guess the whole group of them, that he was in the medics over in Germany, you see. At the Battle of the Bulge, they were taken prisoner. And he was in prison camp then until the war was over, and the Russians released them.
When did you, as a family, find out that he was a prisoner?
Not for some time. I don't think my mother ever got to know. Let's see. No, she when she died, he was stationed in Fort Lewis, Washington, and he came home for the funeral from Fort Lewis. George and he were both stationed at Fort Lewis at the same time. And then it was after that, after my mother and after Nellie died, that he was sent over, because he went over, maybe 6 months or less before the war was. No, he was taken prisoner and in prison camp. Then he came out of prison camp in 45 and was sent home. And he went directly from the battle, from the Stalag something, 2 or so, and he was released and taken to England. And then he was allowed to go on a leave. So he took leave and he went to see our relatives in Scotland and toured all of Scotland, and evidently had some money with him, and traveled all around, and then came back to England, and he had been AWOL for I don't know how many weeks. And the lady at the desk said, "Is your holiday over now?" "Oh yes," he said. Just,
That was Charlie.
yeah.
How old was he when you left Scotland?
Charlie was born in North Dakota.
So he was negative
He
ages.
was never in Scotland before. That was his first trip, but he saw more of Scotland than my father ever did. He saw Scotland. Yeah. And my relatives, our relatives, my Aunt Jessie was so pleased that he came, and he went to my dad's sister's home and met her daughter, and he just got all around. Got to see Auntie Agnes and her husband. And Auntie Agnes was married to an Episcopalian canon. So we have ministers and medics in our family.
Covers everything.
From birth till to the grave, we usher them out.
So is Uncle Charlie's in New York?
He's still alive, right?
He's in New York, and he is thinking. He's been retired for some time. He retired from the Museum of Primitive Arts, and was security guard there when he retired. And now he lives in the senior citizen building where it's really very nice, and he has a very good room. He has a corner room with windows on 2 streets, you know. He likes it all
So he
right.
hasn't run
But
away recently.
No, he is tired of New York. It's not safe to go out,
Yeah.
and he doesn't like the foreign element there. He is not acclimated to foreign people like we are. And North Dakota, you know,
Yeah.
doesn't have that.
Little white.
Yeah, I think Peggy or Kathy talked about visiting him in New York when he lived at the Y or something like, or
Yeah.
above, and had a totally black room or something like this.
Oh yeah, Charlie is colorblind, but you should see the colors he puts together. Reds and yellows and bright greens and blues. And he used to paint a lot. Those just colors, just different shapes and colors, all that sort of stuff he did. He did a lot of that. Is that still going?
Yeah, we're getting towards the end of the tape, but we're doing okay.
Still going.
That must be a long tape.
This is great.
Yeah.
This is fascinating.
Well, I seem to be jumping from subject to subject.
Peggy can organize it all.
That's Peggy, we're having fun.
She'll get it all put together in the right shape. Well, I didn't finish all the, I only
That's
got
right.
to
You got to
Charles.
Charles.
I've
There's 9 of you, right?
I've got
think
Helen
we've got enough
coming
tape.
up. No, yeah. Helen finished high school. And, well, they all finished high school except me. And Helen graduated from high school and worked in the white drugstore and had met her. Jessie and her husband were going together, and Helen and her husband-to-be were going together. And Helen and Jerry are the two that introduced Jessie and Bud, the older sister, you know. And they used to run around together a lot. And they were on their way to go to Devil's Lake to see Helen one time, and Jessie, and either they hit some ice on the road or something, but the cars spun over and tipped over and got out. And Jessie got panicky. They couldn't find Helen. Couldn't find her. She was...
Oh, after the car rolled.
When the car rolled over, yeah. And Helen
Oops,
didn't
we
get
lost
hurt. None of them got hurt. But
Helen fell out.
Bill Hoff took his car and came down wherever they were, halfway between Jamestown and Devil's Lake. And they were only going for a ride, you know, to visit, you know. And he had to come and get them, and they had to put the car in the garage, and I don't know what all they did. How they got back home to Jamestown, I don't know. But after Jerry came to Los Angeles, because he had an uncle and an aunt that had a bar in Los Angeles. And Jerry came out there and was working out there as a bartender. And Helen, then he had talked to Dad about marrying Helen. And Dad said when he had $700 in his pocket, or $500 or something, he could come back and he would talk to him then. So back came Jerry with $700 in his pocket.
Whoops.
So they were married in Jamestown, and the two of them drove back to Los Angeles. So that's how she got to Los Angeles. And of course, Anne graduated from high school and went into nurses training at Trinity Hospital, where Jessie had trained. And then she joined the Nurses Corps because World War II was still going on. And she did part of her nurses education from that. And then she went to Minneapolis and was nursing in Minneapolis and met Marv. He had just come out of the Navy. He was a Navy man. Marv is about 10 years older than Anne. But they're both retired. And they dance up a storm yet. They go to dances yet.
And where did they live?
They live in Anoka.
Is that the farm?
That's where They sold the farm, but they live in a house that was part of the farm at one time.
I went up and visited them once, I think.
I remember your mom saying that they wanted you to see the snow.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah. Well, your dad has a sister that lives there. And Ann and Marv were friendly with the sister and her husband. They worked at the state. And then Bud came out of the Navy and came to Minnesota, to visit his sister. And they were having a hospital picnic for the 4th of July. And the sister invited Bud to go, and he met Marion at the picnic. So that's how those two got together. Back to the hospital again.
That's right. Did everybody graduate from the same high school?
Jamestown.
Yeah. So.
Right, right. And there was one time, Ella Fetcher was the 1st grade teacher in the Roosevelt School for many years, and she always had A. Fraser and Iperspaw. There was another German family, and there was always a Fraser and an Iperspaw. She had all of them, from Mary, Jessie, Charlie, Helen, Jane, and Anne.
Oh
my Jane.
Yeah.
All of them went through the same 1st grade teacher. And my teacher that I had in the 9th grade became the principal of the high school in Jamestown, and all of the kids went through high school under Emma Thompson.
Wow.
You know,
yeah, that's really something.
The one family going all the way through. Yeah, it was good. So I think that's about it. We've educated the family.
Boy, that's. We'll just put a big check on the box.
Is there a little on the tape yet? We can't afford to waste it. Put Jonathan on.
Yeah.
Want to take a little break?
Yeah,
Take a break.
we need to take a break. Yeah.
Stand up, walk around, rest your
Yeah,
voice.
I'm gonna walk
We're
and
gonna
I'm
make her hoarse.
I'm gonna let you see these pictures.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And here we
Now
are.
we've been out to lunch and we celebrated Andy's birthday, and now we're going to do a little homework. Some of the questions that have come up here that Peggy has sent to me was, where did you live? And this is me she's talking about this time. Well, I lived in Fraserburgh, Scotland, and Glasgow, Scotland, and then Fort Frances, Canada, and then to Jamestown, North Dakota. From Jamestown, North Dakota, after 1937 or early 38, we moved to Denver, and we lived there until I went in the service. And then we moved to San Francisco for a couple of months and came down on the peninsula, and we have been down here since 45, when I came out of the Army. So that's about that. And where did you go to school? I went to school in Fraserburgh and Glasgow and Fort Frances and Jamestown. And
Where was Fort Frances?
Fort Frances is Canada.
So where in Canada is it?
It's across the Rainy River from International Falls, Minnesota. Fort Frances, Ontario, Canada. And at that time, it was a very quiet little sort of a lumber town. And a lot of work went on with the rivers and the lakes, and just very country. Wooden sidewalks and a couple of churches. A saloon that we had to walk past every day to go to our house. And schools and a Presbyterian church. But Dad had worked there as the butcher for the one butcher shop. And as I can recall, that butcher that owned the shop was quite the man of town, owned quite a bit of property, and probably sat on the city board, that sort of thing. But anyway, the reason Dad left there, he was kind of he felt was being taken advantage of by this boss. He felt the boss was feeling he had a family and had to live there and had to do what he dictated. And Dad was not about to do that. He felt he could use his own ingenuity a little better. And he, of course, did after getting down to Jamestown, North Dakota. He did much better for himself. And then Peggy wants to know, what responsibilities did you and Nellie have at home? Well, mostly the two of us washed and wiped dishes together. One wiped and the other washed. We sometimes had arguments about who did what the last time. And we would scrap around and wait till like after dinner, be 3 o'clock we would be doing the dishes. And my mother kept saying, get at it and do this and do that. And we just put it off and put it off. But we had to carry in the water, heat it on the stove, and if you let the stove go out and the water got cold, then that wasn't good. So anyway, that was part of our responsibilities. And then, but when we were walking to school, we did our chores after we got home. And there was always wood to bring in and coal and help with the washing. And when Charlie came to the home, I remember after he was born and was a small baby, he was born in October. And that winter, I stayed home from school every Monday so the washing could be done, because he was a fussy baby. He had 9 months colic and he was sick a lot, crying baby. What was your home like? Well, I've discussed that earlier, I think. A 4-room house with no water and no lights, and a bed in every room, and the dining table in the kitchen, and the stove and the table and a bench for the water bucket and the wash basin and so on. And that, now we're up to education. Oh, I missed one here. Did you and Nellie like living on the farm? Well, we really didn't call it a farm, because the only farming that was done was my mother had quite a large garden with potatoes and corn and all the vegetables that you had, and Dad would plow it with a horse. And there was 2 teams of horses, and then they had 1 cow and usually a calf, and pigs in the pig pen and that sort of thing. But it really was the stockyards, because that's where the slaughterhouse was, and all the killing was done out there. And we had no reason to like it or dislike it. It was our home and we didn't know any better. And what illness did you have? Well, I remember having had the mumps and the whooping cough. And when I grew up, like 17 or so, I had strep throat. Other than that, I didn't have any illnesses.
How risky did those seem to you at the time? I mean, did people worry about you much?
No, not at all, except the fact that Agnes became sick after having had, let's see, she had, was it chicken pox she had, and then got what was it that she died of? I have that on, it's all written up under where she became ill. Spinal meningitis. That's what she got. After the measles, not the chicken pox. She had the measles. So we all had the measles. In Glasgow that was. But later, these are the things we had. And there was chicken pox and just children's diseases. George had a bad ear infection when he was about 3 years old. And none of the rest of us ever had ear problems. So we really did not have a lot of sickness, except with Agnes. And Nellie had the same as what the rest of us had. And then how did she survive weighing 1.5 pounds at birth? The doctor recommended that she have 1.5 teaspoons of cow's cream a day to supplement breastfeeding. And that went on for a while, and then they gave her a teaspoon of cod liver oil a day, and she just grew normal. She was a small, rather petite person, but developed just like a normal child. So, and what schools did Nellie attend? That was answered above, and how many years she attended school until she was teaching, and then she kept going to summer school and normal school and until she was married.
What was this normal school?
Normal school is a school for teachers, and the school she attended was in Valley City, North Dakota, which was only 39 miles from Jamestown, between Jamestown and Fargo. Who was your favorite teachers and subjects? Well, I covered that too in the earlier talks that we did. And what school activities did you participate in? I had the normal school activities, but no outside activities, except I did get into a contest for elocution. And there were, from our 6th or 7th grade, about 6 pupils that were in that contest. And I remember we went out once to Eldridge, and 2 programs we put on in the Methodist Church in Jamestown, and made that trip out to Eldridge at one time. And I won 2nd place.
What did you do for the elocution? Did you have to give a speech, or?
Yes, it was quite a long story that was written in prose form, and it was put out by the WCTU of the Home Mission Society of the Methodist Church. And at that time, the women of the WCTU wore little white ribbons, you know, specifying that they were members of the Alcoholics Anonymous type programs. And that was fun. I enjoyed that. And Nellie, I told about where Nellie went. Then church. Well, we had always been Presbyterians until we left Scotland. And during the years we were in Glasgow, we went to church and Sunday school where my aunt went, and she was a Unitarian and was superintendent of the Sunday school. So we went there every Sunday. And after coming to Fort Francis, we went to the Presbyterian church. And coming down to Jamestown, we went a short time to the Presbyterian church, and then found, we're invited to go to Children's Sunday at the Methodist church. And we did that in June, and sort of liked that church better, and found members of the school that we were more acquainted with. The Presbyterian church was more doctors and attorneys and the business people, and we seemed to like the other church. And after that, we big Methodists, most of us, some of us.
So you'd go as a whole family,
At that time,
walk down, get in the car, or
yeah,
sit with everybody? Or?
yeah, we would go by car when they got a car. You know, other than that, we went horse and buggy. But that was not too often. Usually it was the kids who went Sunday school. And we used to go back, like the week that they would have Chautauqua, or I've really forgotten what they called it. The camp, they'd have camps, you know, in the campgrounds. They had church meetings there. And then they had big revival meetings that would be going on for a week. And every night they would, well, it was something to do and a place to go. And when they'd call people to come up to the front and give their life to God and so on, we just sit real quiet and didn't even make a move. We never got in on that part. But we enjoyed going. And sometimes, if we went alone, I remember my mother would start out about the time she thought we ought to be coming home in the dark, and she would come up the railroad track to meet us. And that happened a few times. And every year there was a revival meeting, and we enjoyed that. That was fun.
Anybody sing in the choir or do anything?
Yeah, Jessie did. Jessie sang in the choir, and was the only one that did sing in the choir. Jessie was more musical than any of us. And, let's see. Nellie went to church until she was married and went to Wishick, and there they went to the Presbyterian church, which was the English-speaking church in Wishick. And Bill's parents and the younger members of his family went to the German-speaking church, which I believe was Lutheran. But as they grew up, they found their churches of their own. And I don't really know what different churches they went to. I'm not, yeah, and I don't know about that. The whole family went to church when we were younger. My mother usually, a lot of times we would ride up to church with Dad when he had a car. He got a Ford, I believe in about 1917, a Model T, and we would ride up. And we would go to church, and Dad would go to the shop to look over the books or, you know, do what thing. And I remember we always sat in the same pew, up on the left-hand side of the church. And one Sunday, my mother had a real nice-looking coat with a badger fur collar on it. And somebody either in front or in back said, "I smell a cigar." And my mother's coat collar was full of cigar smoke, because when you ride in a car with curtains on it and Dad's smoking a cigar, naturally you're full of cigar smoke. She was so embarrassed about that coat. I remember that in particular. But we enjoyed that a lot. Did Nellie's and Bill's family go to church together? As far as I know, yes. When they had the children, she took them all to church, and they all went together. And that was in Wishick. They had a good marriage. As far as any of us knew, they always got along very well and were good to each other. When and where did Nellie and Bill meet? When she was teaching in Wishick, she met him in Wishick, and they did their courting there. And
did she ever write you or tell you about that courting? Do you know, was it long or short? Did it take 2 years or 6 months?
No, I would say it was a matter of 8 months to a year, or something like that. It was maybe more than a year, a year and a number of months or something.
And what years would that be? When did they get married?
Golly, they were married in, was it 54? It's in the it's in some of these statistics that we had each other. But I believe they both used to go to dancing. They danced, you know, round dancing. And there was country dances to go to and all that sort of thing. Movies, and there was not much of any other things to do. And they were married in Jamestown, North Dakota, and Alfred and I stood up with them and went with them for like a lunch. And I can't remember, they were married like 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the parsonage of the church. And I can't remember if they left that night and went back to Wishick or what, but they left that night anyway. And I've explained they had a good, normal, married life. What was Bill like? Well, he was a stocky sort of a German young man, healthy, kind, a hard worker, and a good businessman. And he had gone to business school in Bismarck, North Dakota, after he finished high school. And I don't know, business schools usually were about a year or something like that. Then he returned to the hardware store to Wishick and was working with his dad. And that's what he was doing when they were married. And Nellie became ill after, well, she was sick really before Patty was born, and had a difficult time during that pregnancy, thinking that it was just her body was tired and worn. And she figured at that time that they would just not want to be having any more children. It was too hard on her. But that really wasn't it. Evidently the adrenaline gland was in trouble, and she finally died of Addison's disease. And I believe I went into the deeper statistics about what happened there. Other than that, any miscarriages, I don't know any. I never knew anything like. And I cannot remember a great deal about. I knew we drove with Dad in Dad's car, and I believe Bill or Donald Dewar did the driving. He drove the car, and Mary and I drove up to Devil's Lake to go to the funeral. And Jesse was already there with Butch. And Jesse's husband was in Newfoundland. It was during the wartime, and we were rationing on gas and so forth. And I really don't remember much of anything about the funeral service, only that it was in the church in Devil's Lake, and she was buried there. And very quickly after that, Bill sold the furniture and what they did have, and scooped the family up, got them all ready to go to San Francisco. Nellie's family, her sisters, would have taken the children, or one or two, or made it easier for him, but he was either afraid to let them get out of his hands, that he wouldn't get them back, and he said he wanted to keep them together, which I admired in him. And he took them, and that was kind of a horrendous trip, to go by car all the way to San Francisco. He was grieving. Things were hard. The children didn't know what's happened. Their house was disrupted, their toys and everything sold, and they were just, it was sad that that had to happen. And of course, at that time, we didn't know much about it until the children have now grown and can tell us their version of what happened. And they lived in San Francisco then until his father's brother either was sick or died, and Bill's father needed him to come and help him run the hardware store in Wishick. So he took the family all back there, and there's where they lived until Bill died.
Why was she buried in Devil's Lake?
Because at that time there was no way of transporting the body due to the gas shortage. You know.
So you kind of got buried where you died.
Yes. People at that time were buried where they, and Bill is also buried up there in Devil's Lake. That's the reason the two of them are there, away from the family. But it was wartime, and people only had a very small amount of gas. And the hearses and transportation just didn't get into that part of the business.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.